Good morning. My name is Chase Cunningham. My mom calls me Dr. Cunningham because it makes her feel like her money was worth spending. If you really want to get in my good graces, you call me Chief because I'm a retired U.S. Navy Chief. My kids still call me that. We're going to talk about finding, fixing, and finishing within cyberspace. Specifically, we're going to talk about ways that you can sort of track the bad guys in cyberspace, and we're also going to sort of run through what the realities are within cyberspace. I'm a big proponent of staying away from buzzwords. I don't really like a lot of what goes on in the media as far as cyberspace, so my mission here today is to give you some insight into what the realities are when you're talking about cyber threats, and hopefully you get something out of this. I'm not going to make you into some sort of cyber ninja or anything else by the time we're done with this. However, hopefully you get some insight from here. And if you have questions about it, please come and talk to one of us over at the armor table. We're pretty easy to find. You can see all the guys in the bright orange shirts there. You could probably see them from space with that orange on. So this is me. I was at Firehose. Now I'm at Armor. I do have a PhD in computer science. I focused on the Edward Snowden and Bradley Manning cases. So I actually worked on an algorithm to figure out if we could have caught those guys before they actually stole the information that they stole based on how they accessed that information. Feather in my hat was my model came out to be almost 100% accurate every time when they were doing what they shouldn't have done. So interesting prospect in cyber there. Some certifications. The one thing I did want to point out, and I normally don't do this, but because the gentleman who went before me did such a great job talking about what we need to do for the next generation of cyber professionals, I actually wrote a comic book for kids that's focused on cybersecurity. My 5-year-old right now, my 6-year-old, she knows what a DNS sinkhole is. My 4-year-old can tell you what malware is. It helps that their dad works in this area, but they learned it from reading the comic book. They didn't learn it from me sitting around and telling them what that is. So if you have kids or grandkids or students or things of those nature that you think would benefit from learning about this, please go check it out. I'm always open to finding out if you liked it or not. Just let me know. We have another book coming out in October, which is going to have a girl as the cyberspace hero. So I have 2 daughters. I want girls to be in cyberspace. I think we're lacking in having a lot of women in this area. Like I said, I got a doctorate from Colorado Tech, master's from Colorado Tech. I did my bachelor's at American Military University. I've been published quite a few times. I gave up on sleep in about 2004, so that's why my girlfriend will tell you that I'm always sleeping when I'm at home. That's because I just started sleeping again about 2 years ago when I finished my PhD. I worked at Accenture for quite a while. I led some of the research and development initiatives there into cyber-specific operations. I was at the National Security Agency, the NSA, for almost 14 years. That was while I was active duty. So I was wearing a Navy uniform, but I was getting paid by the NSA to be there. It was some of the best, most interesting career operations I've ever had. I was at TCS for a while in Pensacola. I was lucky enough to be involved with a great group of people who helped write the curriculum that the NSA uses now to train soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guard individuals who go to work for the government that are doing cyber operations. So literally we drafted that curriculum. It was an amazing process, and we learned a lot about how to train students on how to actually do cyber operations correctly. New Star worked there doing threat analysis and research for a product called New Century. I was lucky enough to participate in the Configure working group as well as Operation Ghost Click, literally doing real-time support for the FBI, Treasury Department, and Secret Service during those takedowns. And then at Decisive Analytics Corporation, I was there working on projects for the U.S. Army, trying to figure out if we could look at the way malware moves through a network, if we could apply that to how malware would target weapons systems in order to keep those weapon systems from being compromised. So pretty cool projects. I've been really lucky to be in cyberspace and sort of have my hands in everything from education to math to cyber to hardcore operations. I did 3 deployments to Iraq when I was in the Navy, all of that supporting the National Security Agency and supporting different special operations groups. So when I talk about finding, fixing, and finishing, that's literally where I learned my trade craft, was finding the bad guys, fixing them, which usually meant arresting them, and if we couldn't arrest them, we finished them, which you could sort of figure out what that usually means. When we talk about cyberspace and you hear it in the media, this is what you typically think of, and this is what people actually put out there. How many people have seen that movie Swordfish, right? That's such a like great comedy movie to me. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't understand why they didn't win an Oscar for Best Comedy for that movie. I loved it when Wolverine, right, the guy that plays Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, is drinking wine while he's got like 8 monitors in front of him listening to music, and he's building this weird prism thing that he's going to unleash on the internet, and somehow it's going to go build its blocks within cyberspace and target this to pull it there to put it together, and as long as his cube is formed, he's actually going to be successful in his mission, right? That's exactly how it works. I really, that movie was great. And then there was the one that came out this year, which was Black Hat, which was actually a little bit better. One, because it had it had Thor in it. I mean, how much, you know, I don't know why they're making cyberspace movies when you have to have superheroes in them, but that does make them just a touch more awesome. But Chris Hemsworth was in that one, and really you've got this, you know, blonde, muscular guy who's running all over the world carrying a gun for some reason because maybe a server might pop up and shoot at him. And he's targeting this individual who's blowing up nuclear facilities and things like that. And I love how in the movies the bad guy's code is actually always in like a different color than everyone's else. And as they're looking at the screen, they literally just sort of go, yeah, he's not done with his code yet. His program is not finished because it's red and everywhere else is green. Thankfully, it's that simple in what we really do. This is the reality. I mean, this guy right here is probably more along the lines of what you really would expect to see with a hacker, especially what we classify at Armor. We typically say we have 3 different sort of realms of hackerdom. You've got the C-level actors, which is the script kiddies, the guys who don't have a whole lot to do. They've got some knowledge. They probably have a card at Costco that gets them Monster on demand. They've got 3 or 4 different hoodies that they wear for months at a stretch. And they'll stay in their mom's basement looking something like this, and they're typically ganging up together to go after websites to cause sort of hate and discontent. And that honestly is probably 85%, 90% of what's actually going on in cyberspace that causes problems. When you go to a website and things are down, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be because of some sort of script kiddie attack or something strange that's occurred that you weren't typically prepared for. You have the B-level actors, which are the guys that you've probably heard about a lot in the media, which are the Russian cyber criminals. We're starting to see the emergence of some Chinese cybercrime. A lot of the Chinese government folks who used to work for the PLA over there have figured out that since they no longer work for the government, the Russians do a really good job of making billions of dollars by accessing information on the internet that they shouldn't. So why can't they do it? They have the skill set, they have the infrastructure. So literally in the last, say, 6 to 9 months, we've started to see the emergence of Chinese cybercrime. And also some of the cartels in the world have gotten involved in this as well. They've realized that it's really, really painful and really expensive to move drugs back and forth across the border. It takes trucks and tunnels and slingshots and doves with cocaine strapped to their chest and all those other weird things they come up with. But it sure is a lot easier to just set up an underground forum, put your cocaine on there, have somebody come buy it, and then ship it to them through the US postal system. And it works really, really well. Not that I have any coke in my house, but I've heard about that. If I did, I'd be talking a lot faster, I promise you. This is the reality of cyber threats, right? This is from an underground forum. Some of the stuff I'll show you is directly from the darknet you've probably heard about on TV and different things like that. This is from a group called Rex Mundi. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they were pretty prolific last year. They are a pretty powerful group within the underground. You'll notice that this is off of their website on the darknet, and they literally tell you it looks just like a business. They say about us, about the leaks, how we format it. Do you want to join us? You know, come on in. Please feel free. You know, you can be a Rex Mundi operator. They're not even going to charge you. They ask for donations. You know, if you want to donate Bitcoins to us to help Rex Mundi in our operations after you join or before you join or whatever else, feel free. It's anonymous. Nobody's going to know what money you donated, so there you go. And these hacks right here, which I've blotted out, are from different companies. So you'll see that they say things like, what information are you interested in? Do you want to know about their employees? Do you want to know their persons? Do you want to know their mobile phone numbers, their phone addresses, their email addresses, user credentials, passwords? What company are you interested in, and what data would you like? How many folks in here are familiar with Pastebin, right? Or I know the Armor guys are. Or Ghostbin, or any of those other ones, right? Guys go on there all the time. They'll go after a database, crack the database, grab the data. dump it on Pastebin, and open it up and say, come get it. It doesn't take a whole lot of work. Anybody in this room, if you've got an internet connection, could easily go and get information on a variety of different databases that's out there using one of those sites, and it's anonymous. No one's going to know that you were there. Now, I am not saying go do that. I'm just saying it's a possibility, right? This is from another group that calls themselves G89. Basically, they'll say right there, we're selling credit cards. And what they do is they actually say, we're going to sell you these credit cards. We're going to sell them in bulk. And not only that, but we're going to validate for you that the data that we've stolen is valid, that those credit cards are good. And then we'll tell you how much money is actually left on those credit cards. Because it doesn't do them any good if they got my credit card because they realize I'm broke, and then you would try and charge that information and nothing would happen. You would probably wind up with the American Express calling you and saying, Mr. Cunningham, you owe us some money. But really, this is literally it. And they tell you, we don't even have a minimal order. You want 50 credit cards? Great. You want 5,000 credit cards? Great. You want 5? Whatever. In the underground, you'll see guys that auction these pieces of information off at different values. So if you're a person that has a platinum card, if you're Shaquille O'Neal or Jerry Seinfeld or one of those guys that has that black card that American Express only gives to like the uber wealthy, one of those will go for a lot of money on the underground. If you're just a regular person that has a gold card, those will sell for maybe $15 to $20. And if you buy them in bulk, you can usually get them reduced. So if I was to go out and buy 100 cards to test out, I could probably get them for about $5 a pop. It just ranges in what they're selling. On these forums now, you'll actually see guys that are starting to sell medical information as well. Because everybody remembers what happened to Blue Cross Blue Shield and some of the other medical industries, medical companies over the last year. All that data was taken. Now, all that data was taken doesn't mean it vaporized. Somebody took it. It's out there somewhere, and they put it places. This is where it typically winds up. Medical records and medical data, because of the nature of the data that's in there, sells for big money. If you're a corporate executive or you're somebody that they can identify on the open internet as having access to information, say that your company has an enterprise or something like that, and they find medical information that could give them an in to blackmail you, that information will go for a lot of money. We're talking $50,000, $75,000 per record, depending on. Zero-day records, or zero-day exploits also sell in the underground. There's an auction up right now on an underground site for $1 million for anyone to come up with 0-day against iOS 9. Odds are it'll probably show up sometime soon. They sell everything. It's whatever you could want, whatever illicit sort of information that you think you wouldn't want somebody to find out about, it's being sold on the underground. These are more people who operate in those spaces. And they're not exactly out there hiding. They're not doing super clandestine operations and trying to keep you unaware of what's going on. This is not the APT, a 1%er type activity. These are the guys that are actually doing cybercrime and affecting the majority of operations. Darkcode, everybody probably heard about Darkcode being hit by the FBI and some of the other government agencies a few months ago. And the thinking was that they got them. They got the right guys. And if there's any FBI or law enforcement individuals in here, love you, do a great job. However, this is like trying to smash roaches with a hammer. When you turn the lights on, where do the roaches go? They just take off. Turn the lights back off, they come back, right? Same thing. Here they are on Darkcode actually telling their members that we were taken down by the FBI a few months ago. Right now we're coming back online on a new site. And oh, by the way, as we're coming up, we're not letting anybody else join our forum anymore. If we didn't know you before that takedown, you're no longer going to be allowed to join our forum. We're going to vet you before you ever sign up. They have their own operational security protocols. Rex Mundi, again, there they are. This is them literally tweeting out right before Domino's. Anybody remember when Domino's had some issues a while back about their database? This was particularly in France, actually. They were saying if that company doesn't pay us, because they took over the database, and they were saying to the company, if you don't pay us, I think it was something about $75,000. If you don't pay us 75 grand, we're going to release all of your customer information that we have in this database. You have 24 hours to comply. Now, Domino's, being the stand-up folks that they were, said, we're not bowing to your terrorism, and essentially the information got released because it was too late. However, this happens very, very regularly. Does anybody remember Code Spaces happened last year? Code Spaces had a very similar type of activity happen where the bad guys got into the command and control console for their entire Amazon cluster, and they locked CodeSpaces out. CodeSpaces made millions of dollars a year before in revenue. The bad guys told them, you will either give us X number of dollars, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million bucks. You will give us X number of dollars within 24 hours, or we will delete your entire intellectual property, and we will nuke your entire Amazon cluster. CodeSpaces did the right thing. They tried to take over their cluster again and tried to actually combat these guys. Too bad. They nuked it, they deleted it, they ripped everything. CodeSpaces went out of business that fast. Here they are selling stuff within a form. It looks like what you would see when you go to Amazon, right? How many credit cards do you want? Do you want PayPal information? Would you like Uber user name and passwords? What country would you like it from? Would you like Wells Fargo bank data? Would you also be interested in maybe somebody's Amazon cloud? Would you be interested in EC2 clusters, things along those lines? It's all there. This is a form. Literally, this is the same thing. If they had an app, you could just fire up the app and go download it and run it. If you just know where to go get this information, it's there. Here's another posting on Twitter from Team Hans. This one's pretty blurry for reasons that I don't want anybody to actually go look at any of these links. But this is another threat group that's out there that tweets that says, we've got this, you have X number of hours to comply, or we're gonna make you suffer. Unfortunately, for the groups that Team Hans went after, Team Hans didn't care about money. They were doing it just to say, look what we could do. And as folks would not comply with their sort of request, whether it was releasing other information or giving them access to other servers or things like that, they just kept dumping it, dumping it, dumping it, dumping it. They dumped something like 250,000 records the first time that they actually dumped information. The bad guys even have tech support, and it's actually really good. It is not the tech support where you call and you say hello, and then somebody somewhere else goes hello, and you say, I have a problem, and they say, tell me about your problem. And you're like, I thought you were tech support. And they say, well, tell us how we think we can help you. Well, you're tech support, you tell me. These guys actually say, here's what we think you're targeting. We know that this is the information you're after. If you have a question, give it to us and we'll help you find it out. And this particular one, this is a Russian underground site where they're actually looking and saying, we're wondering if this IP address, if we go actually try and do something on this IP address, if it's going to wind up popping up in some sort of sensor area or some sort of threat index that we would get caught. So here you go check it out, call their tech support, throw in your information. It'll tell you right there whether or not it's risky to use that, and it'll also tell you, just in case you need that information, the billing address and shipping information for whoever owns that website. And it'll tell you, is it proxy, and what's the risk score? So that you know, as a bad guy that's going to try and leverage that asset, whether or not you're left swinging in the wind when you jump on that IP address. Pretty good tech support. And they'll do it for free, actually, for a lot of these sites because they want you to go ahead and use those other services. They also have wikis. If you've ever used GitHub, which I love GitHub, but you try and grab some information off there, some code, and go try and run it, you usually wind up pulling your hair out pretty quick because somebody's written up this really cool piece of code. They don't bother doing a really good job of documentation, and then you're trying to figure out why I'm getting this error when I'm running this code. Here, these bad guys know that that's going to happen, so they'll tell you, here's how to do it. If you're going to go after somebody's bank account using our service and using the assets that we've given you, here it is. All you need to do is get the information that we've given you. You need to make sure that you use a VPN because you don't want to get caught, right? Make sure that you use a VPN, jump on there, drop the credit card information, clear the cookies on your PC, use this, confirm the text code, jump in there, grab the money, dump the money, we'll go pick it up for you and we'll send you your cut. They have mule networks that are set up so that when this money is actually transferred, somebody goes and grabs that money physically and then grabs it and ships it somewhere else. You're never actually going to go get that money. You're going to get your cut after it's all been processed by this underground network. There's a town in Romania, I think it is, or Lithuania, that has something like 27 quick cache places within a 3-block radius. Now, what do you think is going on there? There's an internet cafe every 100 yards, and there's a quick cache place within about a stone's throw from every one of those internet cafes. And everybody in this little town where there's basically just donkeys and chickens is driving like Ferraris and things like that. Not hard to figure out what's going on there. So we've sort of talked about what's going on as far as the underground, and that's a really important thing to understand because that helps you gain some situational awareness of the fact that cyberspace is a contested environment. If you're doing business and you're using the internet, I can say unequivocally that you are operating in a battle zone, right? There is crime going on out there, there's nation-state activities, there are governments using that space. Everybody has different objectives, everybody is doing different things, and ultimately, they're trying to get your information. You're trying to do business, but the criminals, the other governments, the other agencies, the bad guys on the internet, they are trying to do harm. So you are transiting a battleground environment, right? I love this picture because I don't know who photoshopped it. They did a great job, but I love that the one guy's like, everything's great. Hopefully, that's not a real picture. When we're thinking about what's going on in your space, and this is where we're getting into the find, fix, finish, right? We're finding out what's going on in our space. How many folks in here operate in a SOC environment and have access to a SIM, right? Or how many folks know what a SIM is? So if you're using or know what a SIM is, the goal of that piece of technology is to basically give you situational awareness of what's going on within your network. The whole point of that piece of technology is to say, here's things that are occurring, here's where things are abnormal, can you figure out what you should be paying attention to? At Armor, our SOC does nothing but this all day long, and we do it really, really well because we've got a bunch of really well-trained folks, and we go after everything that we see that's anomalous. Here you can see pretty quickly where is your problem. From the back of the room, you can tell we've got a problem right there with that giant orange block. That's a DDoS attack. So that IP address has lit up our sensor and it's sent a whole bunch of packets and it's coming in and there's a problem. This is very typical of what you would see with a SIM in your organization, especially if you're monitoring website traffic or things along those lines when an attack occurs. Now you've got to actually start digging in. You've got to start thinking about where is this showing up? Well, that doesn't really do you a whole lot of good. And this is why some of the technology out there is not exactly all it's cracked up to be. It's telling you that there's a problem. But if you don't know what to do with that information, congratulations, you know you have a problem, right? It's kind of like your doctor walking in and saying, you know, I know you've got like a fever and you're throwing up and like you don't feel well, but you're sick. Thank you, Medicare, right? Now you have to actually dig into that. And when you're doing that, if you know how to do it, you're actually looking and saying across time, what indicators are showing up that I care about? So as you can see, here, on a particular date, website traffic spiked up during that attack and then it went away. Luckily, at Armor, we've got the technology to actually grab those packets and go back in time and look and see what that problem set was. So as we're diving in, not to get too deep into the nerd side, but we're looking here and we're saying this is the actual payload of concern during that attack. So now we're digging in, right? This is part of that find area. A lot of people will say, well, I don't know what an indicator is. Well, if you have a spike like this across your network and you're paying attention to things, congrats, there's your indicator. Start figuring out what that problem is. Here, we've teamed up with some different organizations to get exactly which piece of data this is. In this particular case, with another attack, this IP, this little blip that showed up in our Splunk was actually affiliated with a criminal APT or a criminal IP address that showed up in our network. Now we know at this date and this time, this IP, which is tied to this particular actor group that does this type of activity, showed up in our network. So now we've started digging into finding, right? It's pretty easy from there to start making a guess about what's going to be going on. Typically, you can think of different threat groups follow different patterns, right? Guys that steal credit cards steal credit cards. They don't go after nuclear secrets. Guys that go after nuclear secrets don't steal credit cards. They follow along the same patterns for two reasons. Number one, they're good at it and they get away with it all the time. Number two, they've set up a lot of infrastructure and they've gained a lot of practices and written a lot of malware to make that a fundamentally successful operation. Why would they go off and change their tactics, techniques, and procedures when it works? If I knew I could walk into a bank every day at noon and walk out with $100,000 and get away with it, you think I'm going to stop? No, I'm going to buy me some new Nike so I can get in there faster and go to more banks. Now we're starting to get warm, right? So now we're into the find/fix phase. we're diving in. And if you're familiar with any of these tools, we're actually looking at the IPs that are that are transiting our network and the packets that are transiting our network. Over there, we're actually looking at what's going on within the file itself. And then we're looking at what files have been dropped within our network. Pretty easy when you see something show up off an IP address that's got an EXE in it, that something's occurred there, right? Not good. And now we're finally down to that fix point, right? We've found that we have activity. We found that we have an IP address that's of concern. It's tied to a particular actor IP. We've also found that it showed up at a particular date and time, so we can make sure that we're not putting our foot in our mouth when we go to the customer to say that there's been a problem. And now we're going to fix this. We're going to say that this is the actual issue. Well, it came off of this IP address, which is known to target this area. It comes out of this region of, I think this is Russia. Where it showed up, it's also showed up in VirusTotal. Here's the protocols. Here's the honeypot that we have got information off of. Here's all that contextual information. And then down at the bottom, we're actually going to run one more query. And we're going to say, I want to know everything about that particular file that they dropped on our system. I want to know who uses it, what type of malware it's associated with, where that malware comes from, is there a hash value? And if there is a hash value, what research has been done that I can use to leverage that? Because ultimately, in cyber, we have to finish, right? We got to fix this problem and finish this whole thing. When we do that, we take that next step. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky, right? Because you found it, and you fixed the customer problem. Now the question is, do you take the next step and finish, right? Are you going to provide information to either law enforcement or to government agencies or to someone else that can help you keep this from becoming a problem in the future? Now, legally, you cannot do anything without authority. However, if you know what you're doing, you can at least gather some intelligence that you can provide to somebody that they could do something about it, right? It's kind of like if somebody broke into your house and they ran off, I can't go run them down and track them down. However, if I know that they live over there, I can dang sure go down to the cops and say, look, I'm pretty sure that that dude who's driving my car now lives over there. Please go arrest that individual. So this particular case, we actually got some information that there was an IP address that showed up within a network. They posted some information on Payspin. The guy that posted the information called himself Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo, that particular spelling of Victor Hugo associated with that particular username was interesting because it was like something just doesn't line up with this, right? Usually people from that sort of area that would do that type of information spell it with a K, not a C. So when I started digging in on this, Victor Hugo, spelled that way, actually ties up with the guy that wrote Frankenstein, right? He died long before we were using these things. So we started digging in on that and started doing some research for that IP address tied to that Victor Hugo individual who also had a username that matched that Payspin posting. Interestingly enough, he actually had a company that was over there in Europe, which he was hosting a bunch of information. And it actually had his address. And if you'll notice, Victor Hugo, spelled the same way. Same username, everything else, starting to put things together here. Well, as you start digging in on this, you can see pretty clearly that individual, that username, which was all covered, none of this was actually real, this was somebody covering up their tracks, had his information out there for this particular hosting environment. So where he was launching his attacks from, he hadn't done a particularly good job of covering his tracks, and you were able to just do some very rudimentary scans and look and say, well, that's where he is, that's sort of how his operation is set up, and oh, by the way, he had a webcam on that was just open to the internet and was just streaming data. So if you wanted to look in the guy's office, it was literally fire up and look in the guy's office. Probably not the best criminal on the planet, however, he was trying awful hard. Unfortunately for poor Victor, he didn't quite make it that far because when this information was provided to the law enforcement agencies that were involved with this particular investigation, he wound up wearing one of those really snappy orange jumpsuits. He didn't get a whole lot of time. I think he got something like 18 months, not that big a deal, but that's 18 months for just targeting an environment and actually having somebody track you down. Now, I doubt in the future that that individual is going to go after that same environment again because hopefully he's learned his lesson here that even if you do that, if you're going after the wrong environment and people know what they're doing, they will find you, they will fix the problem, and they will finish this thing and get it over with. If nothing else, that's one more person that has the skill set that's doing nefarious things off the streets. So within that, within the find, fix, finish piece, and alluding back to what the gentleman said before me, this is where you actually have to ask yourself the question, and we ask ourselves that at Armor pretty regularly, is within that find, fix, finish sort of process, are you a knight or are you a blacksmith, right? There's lots of tools out there that can do things for you. And there's lots of tools that will do things with those tools for you as well, right? That's a joke, right? So the whole thing is a tool does not make you any good at something. A tool is a function that you should use for something. I don't know a whole lot about nuclear science, but if you put a tool in front of me that allowed me to understand what was going on within a nuclear reactor, I could at least sort of wrap my head around it. That doesn't mean that I'm a nuclear physicist. We have a problem in our industry right now that we give people tools, kind of like the cat has with the screwdriver there, and we say, look, I know that you don't really know what you're doing, and I know that you don't necessarily have the skills to back this particular operation up, but please go find, fix, and finish this problem for us. The question that folks need to ask themselves is, are you the dog down there with, I really don't know what I'm doing, but I sure look like I'm working, right? Or are you a knight? A knight is somebody that picks up the weapon and actually takes it to the fight. That's what we're trying to grow here, is by understanding what's going on in cyberspace, the realities around it, and how you can leverage particular assets within your environment, be it a SIM, be it a protocol analyzer, whatever else. Those are tools that you, if you take it up as a knight, can leverage to actually combat this threat within the environment. If you're not doing that, unfortunately, you're just a blacksmith. You're leveraging tools. You might even be making tools better. But ultimately, in order to defend an environment, you need knights. Can you imagine how hard it would be to defend castles back in the day if there was just 1,000 blacksmiths? Like maybe you could make people trip as they ran over the swords to come in the drawbridge. But that's really about it. Without having knights, you just have a lot of people that are leveraging tools to do particular operations. And really, this is the problem, right? You may have tools. Remember what happened to Target? Target had a $3 million appliance in their system that was telling them, ding, 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 something's wrong here, ding, 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 something's wrong here, ding, 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 ding. Somebody was like, you know what, something is wrong here, shut that shit off, it's annoying. And they turned it off, and there it went. And then they had a compromise, and they lost X number of records, and things went sideways. Sony had just hired a really, really, really smart guy to help them run their internet security and their information security policies. They had just spent quite a bit of money in an encryption strategy, and they had put things in place. They had lots of tools from different blacksmiths in place. They didn't have hardly any knights that were there. And unfortunately, everybody knows what happened, right? So now, they didn't break into Sony, however, comma, they've got, the new movies up there, and they're changing things on the background. So with that being said, the whole point is to hopefully get you a little bit of understanding about the realities of what's going on in cyberspace, just how sort of nefarious and malicious some of the activity is that occurs in that space. And if you have some of these tools available to you at your organization, or you're getting familiar with them from school or things along those lines, start learning how to or practicing how to take those 3 steps, right? Find the problem within all that noise, fix the problem, and then if you decide that it's the right thing to do, and if you have the capabilities and technologies not to get yourself in trouble, get the information so that you can get it to the law enforcement guys so that they can finish and get rid of that problem set. That's the whole goal of this piece. If you have questions or other concerns, please feel free to come chat with me. I don't like to hold people up before we go to lunch because everybody's looking at me like, stop talking, I'm ready to go eat. But we're here to help you out. If you have anything that you want to know about hosting or secure environments or encryption and things along those lines, please feel free to talk to one of the guys in the orange shirts back there. If nothing else, thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.